Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Decided Heart Effect, where we ask you to take action every week and be inspired to live with a decided heart. My name is Sonia Montiel, and I have my great co host here, Hillary Bilbrey. And we are joined today by a wonderful person, Joey Pollaro. He is the founder of Efficacy Life Coaching. And Joey, what I love about some of the other titles you give yourself, I have to share this with our listeners, is so you're a health and wellness coach, but you are also a strategic interventionist, a knowledge business broker, and a spiritual warrior. And we cannot wait for you to share what those things mean to you and for you in your coaching practice. But first, I just want to take time and just say thank you so much for joining us today.
You're really welcome. I'm really excited to be here. I was looking forward to this. When you and I had met and had an initial conversation, we really connected, and I was excited to get on the show. And we were talking a little bit about, in the beginning of the show, I think it's important to mention is, as long as we have the right intention, this, and we are remaining open to receive and to, be in flow and stay in the stream of life, this is going to go exactly how it's supposed to go. And that requires, I believe, which we also were talking about, is less rigidity, less systematic, less boxes, less bold lines, and more of unfocused. So I'm really grateful to be here. My intention is to continue to share my voice, to spread my message, and in hopes that one person, only one person, if it's only one person who hears my message, leaves this conversation with a little bit more hope than they had when they got here, I think we've done our job.
Absolutely, for
I think
sure.
that's a beautiful intention. And I love the idea, for us, Sonia and I, our goal is always, and our intention is always to help to obviously lift our guests, but also hopefully have a moment where our listeners have an opportunity to understand that they are in control more than they think, that they can make a decision, that they can live with a decided heart, and in so doing move into action and lift themselves. So we really appreciate having you here and would love for you to give a little bit of background. You have such an incredible story for our listeners and our viewers. Can you share a little bit about how you got where you are today?
A lot of rocky roads, wrong turns, hard stops, um, mistakes, failures, restarts. Um, I will give you it's hard when I have to tell my story in an abbreviated time frame. I'll do my best to give you the shorter version and the PG version. Um, but I do want to mention, you mentioned like decisions, and you mentioned choice. And, you know, my life, I never knew that I had a choice. I didn't know that I got to choose the type of man that I wanted to be. That I got to choose the type of life that I wanted to live. That I got to choose the way that I contributed to the world. Um, it it took me, and we'll get into it. Like, I'm alcoholic and I'm a drug addict and I'm in recovery since August 20th, 2009. So living decades in active addiction is obviously a huge part of my story, which turns out to be my greatest gifts. Not only because of the what it takes to crawl out of those spaces, but the life experience of transforming my life, and having actually gone through that, um, puts me in the unique position to be of service to others, helping them along the same path. But I didn't know that I had a choice. I didn't know that. I think we hear a lot about why, especially in the personal development world, like know your why. And I have an alternate view on that, because, like, I think the more important question is who, right? So it's, who do I want to be? How do I want to show up? Like, what values do I want to live by? I was always living by values that were injected into me by other people, or through past life, or through media, or teachers, religious, whatever. Um, and I had zero awareness of, why I did what I did, really why humans do what they do, and what I was choosing as my solution to life. But at a very young age, and I think this is a common thread in addicts and alcoholics, it's a common human thread. So addicts and alcoholics, I don't think have cornered the market on this. I, in my heart, from as early as I can remember, thinking for myself, being able to speak for myself, which is, I don't know, a few years old, 3, 4. I always felt separate from other people. I felt other than. I always was comparing my insides with other people's outsides. I had no communication tools. I always felt like I wasn't enough. And that's in spite of outside circumstances. So like you'll hear a lot about people who either choose alcohol and drugs as their solution to life, or somehow wind up going down that path, is that usually they're trying to treat some sort of trauma, or they come from abusive homes, or they have been experienced things like poverty or discrimination or racism or something along those lines. And that's just not my story. So like, it's important that I say that, because there's people, like, addiction doesn't discriminate. I grew up in a home, like, I mean, there's shit that went on. I mean, there's always life is life. But in general, I always felt safe in my home. I always had what I needed, and I always had a lot of love and support. On the outside, my life looked great. Like, I did well in school, I did well in athletics, people were attracted to me. But in my mind, I always wondered, like, what's wrong with them? Like, why do they want to be around me? And so I think I was born with this feeling of being less than. And when I was interested in alcohol and drugs before I even picked up a drink, like 5, 6, 7 years old, I'm a people watcher. So um, I noticed the effects of alcohol on other people, and my perception, which is probably warped most of the time. Like, my perception of the world is usually skewed, was that it elevated people. It increased happiness in the room. The energy shifted in the room, and I couldn't wait to do it. And running around feeling broken and feeling other than, and feeling separate from others and feeling less than. When I picked up a drink, alcohol had a immediate effect on me. Now, I only could say this in hindsight, because like I said, I had zero awareness of how I got through life. But in hindsight, I know at that moment, it became my number one priority. And like it gets, for especially if there's a genetic component to alcoholism, I believe, and it definitely runs in my family. And despite warnings, I didn't pay attention to, but you know, uh, it affected my life. And what I did was arrange my life. At the age of 11, I arranged my life to protect my right to drink in the future, because it calmed my thinking down. It made me feel less like a freak. Like, I felt like a freak inside. I felt like I was different than other people. And like it does, it progressively got worse. And it was obvious to everybody but myself, because I had this block there. Like, I was protecting, like, for decades, despite overwhelming consequences, most consequences associated with living a life like that, short of long-term prison or death, despite overwhelming consequences on all fronts, I could not see that like I had a problem with alcohol and drugs, because it was the only thing that worked for me. And I chose it as a solution to life. And it got messy, you know, but before even I was even out of my teens, things were happening. Like, you know, I would get in trouble with the law. I would be unable to meet my commitments. I would end up half, you know, half in the front door, half out of the front door on the front lawn. I would disappear for days. And, you know, I never saw it as a problem. And like I said, like, I made sure that I did well in school. I made sure that I showed up to work. I made sure that I did well in athletics. I made sure to put on this facade to protect that, having zero awareness of it. So where that brought me ultimately, over the course of 2 decades, was a point where I had hit a bottom, and I had hit many bottom over 20 years, many. Um, you know, I would get, by the time I was out of my teens, I was getting, you know, having to go to detoxes, or I would get forced into recovery programs by the law, or the boss, or parents, or girlfriends. And I would go in and I would do my time, so to speak. And I would tell everybody what they wanted to hear, and do what everybody wanted me to do for significant periods of time. I wouldn't drink or drug, sometimes well over a year, until the smoke cleared and I would go back to doing what I did, the only way that I knew how to live. But where that winded me up on was in 2009. I had a $300 a day heroin habit that was going on for years. I was homeless. I was jobless. I was penniless. I felt worthless. I had pushed everybody away that loved me and had my best interest in mind. And I still wasn't done. So there was a divine intervention. You know, I wish I could say that there was a choice. There was a choice after about a year into recovery, where I committed to recovery. But there was a divine intervention on August 20th, 2009. And I went into a detox, hopefully for the last time. And, you know, I went in with the same intentions that I always went in. I went in waiting. I had to come up with another plan, how I can continue living the way I was living. And that's not what happened. I got into a recovery program, which I hadn't planned on, because I had burned all my bridges. I come from a family that doesn't really necessarily have any resources in the way of finances. And, you know, things just kind of fell into place. And I feel like there were higher forces at work. And, you know, I went into Utah, and I checked into an inpatient program. I was there for 3 months, and I'll speed things along, but my recovery wasn't linear. I got a lot sicker before I got any better. So, you know, despite the actions that I was taking, which were in direct opposition of what my brain was telling me to do, my brain was telling me to run, but I just kept taking steps. And I feel like during this early stages of recovery that I was being pushed, pulled, dragged, carried by something higher than me, a universal force that I stay out of the debate of what that is and what it looks like. I just know that it acts on us, whether we like it or not. And there are very, you know, important ways that we could learn to plug into those higher forces. But I got sicker, and I was, you know, my days about 4 months sober looked like sleep 20 hours a day, obsessing about suicide, obsessing about using drugs. I was in a recovery program. I was in an outpatient program. I would show up there. I would meet with my mentors in that program about an hour a week. I would do the inner work necessary to recover, and I continued to tank. I turned to food, you know, and I I was essentially was doing the same thing I did with alcohol and drugs with food. And over the course of from 2009, you know, August 2009 to March 1st, it's a very specific date, because we'll talk about that later, because it's definitely one of many decided heart moments. But on, you know, on that day, on March 1st, 2015, I was 415 pounds. I was sicker than I ever was. I was wallowing in self-pity and victimhood, and I was unemployable, and I was terrified. Um, and in my opinion, I was sicker than when I got into recovery, which I told you I came off the streets. So, yeah, so that's the what it was like. And what happened, you interrupt me anywhere because I could just keep running my mouth.
Can I just say, one of the things that I'm resonating with is before we actually started recording, but you talked about working on the awareness, like how we love the linear path. You were looking for, you need bold, linear path. And, as a child, it was almost like that first sense of control. This is a simple decision for me. I have control, and it's alcohol, and I can make a decision about it. And it's bold, it's linear. And of course, looking out, it's like, oh my gosh, why do we have to start there? Why couldn't it have been anything else? And we know the story of that. But, the decided heart effect is about, first of all, we can't make a decided heart moment if we're not aware of it. So it's the fact that, and you explain this beautifully, like your head was always down looking for this bold line. And it's the moment where we have to look up and say, well, where the hell am I? And who's here? And where am I in this? And I think that takes a lot of work to actually lift up and have that awareness. And I don't know for you, and I know you mentioned we're all still working at it, but was there a moment where you said, wait, let me look up?
Yeah, there was. That's my daily struggle, because I transformed my life, not only staying sober a day at a time, but regaining my health, and integrating, all pillars of holistic functional health. And so, in order for me to have done that, I had to build healthy habits. I had to be super consistent. I had to be super disciplined. I had to be regimented. And so what it took for me to crawl out of those spaces served me really well. However, where I am today in my life, what I'm realizing is when my head is down and I am in these boxes and systems, that I am not in flow. Like, I think that, I miss windows of opportunity. I think I'm a moving target, and it's hard to, you know, uh, I become a human. I've heard it put this way, and I'm probably stealing somebody's thing, but we talked about that before the show too. Like, there's no original material; it's all a remix. But I became a human doing, instead of a human being. And in order for me to be, I need to be still. And in order for me to accept what the universe is giving to me, I need to be able to receive. And that requires me looking up and opening up and letting go. So, that's but I did have a moment, and I think this is one of the most influential decided heart moments. And again, it included a divine intervention. So another way to be able to receive, and you'll hear this a lot from people who get really sick, and maybe lose their senses or lose their health, or something with their physical body breaks down. And sometimes our brains and our minds are barriers to what the universe wants to give us. And at what I consider one of my sickest moments, without seeing light at the end of the tunnel, the February 28th, 2015, I had a dream. And in that dream, I was visited by my deceased grandfather. And in that dream, he was frantically screaming at me, intensely screaming at me, shaking me, and screaming to me, "He who isn't being busy being born is busy dying. He who isn't busy being born is busy dying." And the interesting part about that is and why I knew it was important and not just a dream, because my dreams could get really all over the place. I think if you had a window into my dream world, you might put me in a straitjacket, and sometimes I live a whole nother day at night. However, like, I knew it was important because when my grandfather was alive, I had never heard him raise his voice. Like, he was the most gentle, mild mannered man that I ever met. And I never saw him lose his temper. I never saw him raise his voice. I never saw his feathers get ruffled. And he was intense about this. And so I woke up, and I'm absorbing all this, and it did ring a bell. Like, I've heard that before. And it turns out, and I don't think it necessarily matters, I think the meaning behind it matters, but it turns out to be a lyric in a Bob Dylan song, from a song called "It's All Right, Ma, I'm Only Bleeding." And so I'm thinking, he who isn't busy being born is busy dying. And I had a awakening. I had awareness. I had awareness that I wasn't scared to die, that I was scared to truly live. And I was in a ton of fear. And I I was scared to jump into the stream of life. And so you mentioned control, right? This was a way: food, alcohol, drugs, gambling, sex, overspending, underspending, over exercising, overworking. All these things are a way for us to maintain control, and it's a lack of trust. And I just, I don't know. I woke committed. I woke committed to stop living in fear, to jump into the stream of life, to take back control of my health. And, but where do you start? I have this giant mound of not only like mental and emotional and spiritual sickness, but now, close to 200 pounds, which to me seems like an insurmountable task, but what I realized about humans and human potential is what I think is possible and what's actually possible aren't even in the same ballpark. However, I started, like you change anything, there needs to be, first of all, awareness that something needs to change. We talked about that. There needs to be acceptance that it needs to change. And then there needs to be commitment. And my definition that I use for commitment is an endless series of very small, painful actions. Endless. There needs to be trust, right? There needs to be consistency, like consistent actions, small, tiny actions, but done consistently. Consistently means every day. And the key piece, and this is the struggle that we're talking about, is non-attachment. And that's the letting go. So like, I need to have the desire. I needed to be committed. I needed to be putting the work in consistently. And I got to really want it. But at the same time, I need to be willing not to have it.
You
and
know
so
what? Oh, sorry. I was going to
go right ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Joey. You know what occurs to me though, because even at the beginning when you were talking about your story, it was, and please don't take this the wrong way, but it was exhausting. And why it was exhausting for me is I kept on hearing you, like, you were working so hard to cover everything up and living this life that you were constantly having to get out of. So what occurs to me is the very same things that got you out of it were the very same things you were already doing to stay in it. Mm-hmm. It was just flipping the switch for the positive. I mean, but think about the intelligence and the extreme work and the commitment and the trust of the alcohol to take you a different place, all of those things that were happening out here, and turning it and flipping the switch and looking in. I mean, really, truly, wouldn't you say it was probably the same amount of energy, but in a different direction, which was difficult?
I think you make a really good point. Like, what changed was the focus, and the meaning. And however, I will say that, changing anything or having goals or transforming your life or making new choices and new decisions, creating the type of person that you want to be a moment at a time is a lot of work. But the truth is that, like, the life that I lived is a 24-hour a day 7-day-a-week job. That's, you know, covering up lies, manipulating everybody around me, covering my tracks, controlling other people, doing anything within my, in my power, in waking hours and sleeping hours to get what I needed. Recovery from alcohol and addiction, holistic functional health takes a lot of effort, but I would say about 20% of the effort, or less. So like, they say you need to go to any length if you want to, you want to make change, and you need to be committed, and you need to be consistent. But it was so much harder work, living a life in active addiction, and juggling all those balls, and managing the world, than it is to stay sober a day at a time, regain my health, and stay focused on like my purpose and my mission. But it's a really good point. But the skill sets are the same.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, like I just shifted what I was focusing on. And I've also heard that like where focus goes, energy flows. So it's like I shifted it from these things of my lower nature to things of my higher nature.
Well, and anything that's in motion. Oh, I'm sorry, Sonia. I was just going to say anything. First of all, congratulations as well. I mean, it's just amazing to me. But anything like from a physics mentality, right? Something in motion. The hardest part of the energy is what is changing the momentum.
Mm.
And so, really, truly, from a momentum standpoint, I mean, it is incredible and amazing, and nothing to be like, oh, it was just a shift. But then when you sink into that shift and you move the momentum, you can tap into who you always were to begin with. Sonia, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
Oh, no, for sure. Thanks for mentioning that. But you are a coach now, and, recognizing, and helping those who need that help, that energy to shift, and into a positive mindset. And I'm very curious for you, when, you had the dream about your grandfather and you said, okay, it's time to live. But you said the starting point so hard to face. Did you have a coach? I can't imagine you doing this by yourself, but maybe you did. Who were your coaches, or did you have one coach, or were you on your own?
To answer your question is no. I don't think it's possible to do anything alone. Anytime we're looking to change anything or improve our lives, it's super important to surround ourselves with people who love us and have our best interests in mind, who aren't scared to tell us what we want to hear, and who are going to support us, and specifically a community of people with a common problem and a common solution. And then, of course, there are higher forces that are always with me. Call it whatever you want, the universe, God. I really don't care what you call it. I personally stay out of that debate. I think the more intellectual I make it, it blocks me from it. So I just know that these forces exist, and I have learned tools to plug into these forces, which are really tools about staying present, because I think, that's where these forces are. They're not a second ago. They're not a second later. They're only in the present moment. So whatever it is, tools that we use are about getting in the present moment. But, a good part of it, was self-education. And, I was really good at building habits. I was really good at building bad habits, and I was an expert in it. And so I also spent most of my life building high-end custom furniture. And so which really served me well in building anything, whether that be better health or a relationship or a business, or helping a client, build a life for themselves that they desire. And so I have a mentality of you have this really large goal. You have this really huge mountain that you need to climb, and to be able to break that down into the smallest, simple, actionable steps, and then create a system around it. And to build it, so you get some consistency, so you plug into that higher force of momentum that you were talking about, Hillary. Like, momentum is something that it's like gravity or truth or love or energy. It's a force beyond ourselves, and the only way to plug into it is to be in forward motion. So yeah, I did a lot of studying. I did a lot of reading. But more importantly, because now I don't believe that knowledge is power. I believe that applied knowledge is power. So more importantly, I put those things that I was learning, I tested them on myself. And I started really small, and I did it really consistently, and I added a little bit to a little bit to a little bit, and over the course of I don't know how long has it been, 6 years, I've been able to stay sober a day at a time. I've been able to release 180 pounds without any medical intervention, crash diets, insane exercise program. In fact, I just now am upping my game in regards to physical fitness, because I've sort of plateaued, and I also am now in the stream of life. And I have desires, and I have things that I want to accomplish, and I feel limited because of my physical condition. So I've right now I've added a lot, but I've lost all that weight without breaking a sweat. I did it with a lot of I did something. One of the things that I did something called the 5 Tibetan rites, which is an ancient yogic practice. There are 5 movements that you do in a row, 21 repetitions of each. And between that and walking is how I lost the weight. And then, of course, my diet. It was the biggest thing that I did was cut sugar out. I had no idea that I was addicted to sugar. It's like you don't really realize it till you eliminate it. I've taken no giant leaps. I've taken lots of little steps, and I'm never doing it alone. Like today, I have a coach. I have a coach that helps me. He's an acupuncturist and a spiritual advisor. I have a physical trainer. I have a business coach. So like, these are things that are important to me. My highest priority values are, my health, my sobriety, and then, owning my gifts, which is my life. All that pain and all those mistakes and all those failures today are my greatest gifts to help other people along the same path, because I've walked down the path, and those are the best teachers. So when I'm looking for a teacher or I'm looking for a mentor, I look for somebody who's done what I want to do, because they're able to take that life experience, wisdom, and transfer it to me in a minuscule amount of time that it took them to acquire it. So I'm a firm believer in coaches, mentors, guides. I have a team of people helping me. Yes.
I love that, because I think it's so important for our listeners, our viewers, to really think about that. And I had this image when you're talking about surrounding yourself with people, because sometimes we find ourselves, and I've used this analogy before, it's a pretty common one, of the crabs in the barrel, right? When you stay in one place and you can't get out, look around you, because oftentimes you've got the people that are like, no, because if you get out, then I have to look at myself. So they keep pulling you back down into that barrel. And so I love this image. It's like I'm picturing in my head somebody on the other side of the barrel going, nope, here you go, buddy. I'm already out. Like, I already got out. Let me join you. Let me throw you the rope. And I think it's so important for us to have that pause. I mean, for some reason, that is really what's resonating with me through this entire conversation, as you're talking about being present, is that no decision can ever be made. No change can ever happen when you are constantly in this state of doing and reaction, but you really do have to pause and be present and say, okay, hold on. Where am I? Let me look around. Do I want to get to that other side? Who's already over on that side? How can I get them to help me? But it really requires you to stop moving for a moment and be curious and assess what is around you.
That's a really good point. And Sonia touched on that too. She says, like, looking up. Sometimes you just need to look up. So when I'm out let's just say I'm on a hike and I'm in the woods. There's times when I take my hikes and I don't pick my head up. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, yeah, I'm very like intently and purposefully focusing on something, whether it might be gratitude, it might be, you know, my business, it might be my health. These are all really important things for me to focus on it because they fall within my highest priority values. But like that takes me out of the present moment. And sometimes I'm in the woods for an hour and I realize I didn't look up. Yeah. So, you know, part of my daily practice is to be looking around, to be looking up, to look at all the truth and beauty and goodness that's in the world. And that requires me to be still and to be aware and to not be moving all the time, you know, and it's hard for me. And at this point, I don't even remember if we were talking about it before, before we opened up here or during, but, you know, being super disciplined for me, you know, it kind of works like this for me. It's like, I always thought that doing whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted, meant freedom, meaning not following any rules, not doing what people told me to do, not complying to anything, not following the law, like just doing whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted was freedom. And I guess if you think about it intellectually, you would think that it is, but it actually created a self-imposed prison for myself. And so when I started to figure out, you know, how to get out of these spaces, it required a whole lot of discipline. And what I found is that the opposite is true. The more disciplined I am, the more free I am. Mm. And, you know, being super structured and disciplined and consistent and operating within systems and building good habits served me really well. But I'm at a point in my life where I'm realizing that creativity lies in an unfocused state. It lies in the being, like not in the doing. It requires looking up. It requires like breaking down walls of those boxes that I have created that really serve me really well. And so a lot of my spiritual work, and all spiritual work, is about shifting perspective. There's so many ways to do that. Like I don't really look at it in a mystical, esoteric way. I think all spiritual work is about shifting perspective. And so like my big thing is to, and like I said, I'm a structured person. I have to structure things in, but I now structure in a certain amount of time for unfocused time or laziness time. And what I noticed, and there's brain research to back this up, and I didn't know it at the time, is that creativity lies in an unfocused state, not in a focused state.
Mm-hmm. I think this is I want to leave our viewers and listeners just with that thought and let that settle in. I think it's so powerful. It may release more questions and answers, and they're going to reach out to you, Joey.
The questions are the answers, right?
Right. And then they're going to need
ask
someone.
The right questions.
So what is we're going to post all the links and how to contact you, but what is the best way to reach out to you? Should our listeners,
you can, LinkedIn, Joseph Pollaro, Facebook, Efficacy Life Coaching, email joseph@efficacylifecoaching.com. I'm going to spell it because apparently people have a really hard time spelling it. I don't understand why, but it's EFFICACY lifecoaching.com. So joseph@efficacylifecoaching.com. You can pick up the phone, call my business line, 973-998-1498. I could be found.
Yeah, you have been found. I mean,
yeah.
I think that is really the most powerful thing that came out of, I mean, I love everything about your story, but going into this day, I'm ready to go and hug my kids and remind them to be present. And really that is where you find who you are and connect with your heart. And I'm thinking of the line from The Alchemist that was, and the boy and his heart became friends. And that really feels like where you are leaving us today, Joey. And thank you so much. It was congratulations on everything that you have accomplished. And thank you for the gift of bringing everything, the pain, the hardship, all of that to light so that you can be in service to other people and help other people on their journey. So we appreciate it so much. Thank you so much. And we say to our viewers and our listeners, we appreciate you being with us for another episode of the DH Effect, the Decided Heart Effect, reminding you all that you have the ability to be still, to pause, to make a choice, and to live with a decided heart.